Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Parenting Against the Grain. We have people, I hope we have some people join live. If you're watching later, thank you for watching later and watching the replay. And you can chime in with comments and I will check back and try to respond. If we have any new people, welcome to the group. I hope you're watching and reading up on the comments. I try to do lives about once a week or so and just discuss a topic that is relevant, I think, to most of us. And sometimes people suggest topics. So if you have a topic that you would like to discuss, you can always, throw that in the comments or the Facebook page and we can discuss that. So happy Friday. Hope everyone's doing well. I don't know if we'll get anybody on live, but that's fine. So if you're new to the group, this Parenting Against the Grain idea is how do we use research and our intuition to parent in a more informed way, I guess is my little tagline. So it's all about using research, but also, figuring out what works for your individual child and not just kind of going with the flow of what society tells us to do in terms of parenting. And I posted a video back at the beginning of the kind of school year, August time, that talks a little bit more about the mission of this group. So you can go back and watch that if you would like more info about that. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence in our kids and how do we foster that. And as with all these live videos, I think it's good to point out that I am not the perfect parent. And I don't claim to know everything. I'm trying to be a facilitator and support, and this group to be a support for all of us. And so we all make mistakes. We're trying to do the best that we can. And so let's foster an atmosphere of learning and support. And I think that that is how we will all help and all grow as parents. So emotional intelligence. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, as you guys probably know, because I talk about it all the time in this group. So, we hear emotional intelligence, kind of the term thrown around a lot in the media and parenting circles. But what do we really mean? Why is it important? So I have a post about this. I was going back over and reading it, and I was reminded that Google came out, I don't know, maybe about a year ago with this big study of their top employees and how they determine their top employees. Now, this is not to say Google and high-tech companies are the end-all be-all of, jobs or what we want our kids to do. But high-tech and companies like Google are a big part of the economy now, and many of our children will probably someday be in some sort of atmosphere like that, some sort of high-tech company. And so the theory in the past was, well, if my kid's going to work in one of these high-tech companies, they just need to know how to code and, program and everything computer related, high-tech. That's what they need to know. Well, while that is true to a certain extent, what this study at Google found was actually their best employees, the ones that get promoted and get, higher level positions and things like that, are the ones that have these what we call soft skills, which are social emotional skills. Cooperating with others, listening to other people, empathizing with their coworkers, all those things still matter. And I think that was fascinating just from the sense of sometimes we forget about that. And even in our school systems, many of them today are so focused on STEM and getting our kids ready for high tech and coding, and all that stuff's important, but sometimes these soft skills kind of get left out of the picture. I think more schools are becoming aware of this, and social emotional curriculum are becoming part of the school system more commonly now, so that's great. But these soft skills really do matter, and they matter just for even beyond job security. They matter for your life. I mean, kids, and we know this in our own lives, people that we know that interact better with others and play nice with others, as you hear in kindergarten, those are the people you want to be around. Those are the people that you want to be in relationships with. And so I think these skills matter for all of us, regardless of what kind of job you're going to go into. They matter for relationships, for marriages, for parenting. It all it all feeds into the same idea that social emotional skills are what make you a happier person in the long run. So this, I think, is a big topic that we should, be concerned with as parents. Obviously, we want our kids to be good people. And beyond the job piece of it, we want our world to be a nicer place to live. In the last few years, it seems like all you hear in the media is about conflict and strife in our world. And even on social media, there's so much conflict and so much, people trying to one up each other, and, these bad comments that we see all the time. And we don't want that for the world that our kids are in. And we don't want them to experience that as adults. And so the way to change that, I feel like, is to foster these social emotional skills so that when they are adults, then maybe the world can be a little bit nicer place. And they're the ones that are going to be able to do that. So how does this relate to parenting against the grain? Well, I think, to my mind, parenting against the grain, when I started this group, the idea was, how do we not just go along with what we see in society? How do we not just go along and go with the flow in terms of parenting? And some of what I see, at least in kind of modern parenting culture, is just sort of like, the kids are all right. I'm a good person. My kid's going to be a good person. I don't really have to put a lot of effort into doing intentional work to help foster emotional skills, because they're just going to learn it as they go along. And while there is the point that modeling works when you're trying to teach social emotional skills, so the skills that we model, if we really are good people and are kind to people, then our kids will pick up on that to a certain extent. So there is some truth to that. But this idea of kindness and empathy is taught, is just caught. It doesn't have to be taught. That's kind of the catchphrase, right? I don't really buy into that, because we see this all the time in generations past, where, there wasn't always a lot of emphasis put on emotional skills and emotional learning. And those skills sometimes are not caught just by watching. Sometimes they do need to be intentionally taught. And so this idea that kids just sort of learn this stuff by osmosis, I think, only goes so far. And so to me, that's where the parenting against the grain idea comes in. Is parenting against the grain, I think, for me, means we have to be intentional about fostering empathy, kindness, and emotional skills in our kids. It's not just going to happen by osmosis, at least not to the extent that we would like, I think. And so we have to not just go with the flow, but be intentional about how we interact with our kids and the things that we want to foster for their emotional skills. And so I think that's a key piece of it, is being real intentional about it. And it doesn't mean like you're top down, heavy handed with like, you need to be a nice person and this is what we're going to do to make you a nice person. That's not going to, that loses the spirit of it. Right. And so, but being intentional in how we talk to our kids and the things that we try to foster in their lives. Okay, what else was I wanting to talk about? So parenting against the grain idea. To me, the biggest part of this with emotional skills is not stuffing down emotions and not punishing emotions. This, to me, is probably the biggest thing I've learned in the last few years, in terms of, this is a different way of parenting. This is not probably the way most of us were raised, and definitely not the way our parents were raised. And so this, to me, is parenting against the grain when it comes to emotional learning. Stuffing down emotions is not going to get you anywhere. Kids do not learn anything from that. And so this has been really eye-opening to me. And this book that I love, that I talk about all the time, The Yes Brain, that's one of the big points of this book, is that, we want our kids to behave, and we want them to, follow rules and do the things that we want them to do to be good people. But just extinguishing their emotions is not the way to get there. And so this has been such an important point for me as a parent, that I want to really focus on this for a few minutes. So I think a lot of times positive parenting, this type of parenting, gets a lot of flack sometimes, because people have this impression, especially older generation, maybe our parents or even grandparents, have this impression that if you don't lay down the law, if you don't enforce the rules, then your kids are just going to get away with everything and they're not going to have any discipline. And that's not really what this approach is saying. It's distinguishing between, you can put boundaries on behavior and you can implement rules and boundaries, but we don't have to punish emotions. And so if your child is getting upset, they're sad, they're angry, they have the right to express that emotion. They don't have the right to hit. Okay, so that to me is the key distinction. We can enforce rules, we can put boundaries on behavior, but they can express any emotion they want to. And this is a hard balance to find. Even in my own parenting, it's really tricky because those two things often are tied together. Kids get upset, they get angry, and they take it out in ways that we don't want them to, right? They hit, they scream, they yell, they call us names maybe. So trying to help them understand the difference is often the hardest part, like you have to say that you can say those things like, it's okay for you to be mad, it's okay for you to be upset, but you don't call names, or you don't hit your brother, or whatever the situation is. And that is a hard thing to distinguish. And for kids, it's hard too. But I think that is a really key point in understanding how we foster emotional skills, is like, you have to help them. They can learn to deal with their emotions in a healthy way by doing this, but it doesn't mean that their emotions just go away. And so that's a key point, I think, that we can, talk about and help us understand. And so there's ways to do that, just as I was saying, you can put boundaries on behavior. And, I oftentimes tell my kids, just go to your room and take out that emotion in some other way, or go outside and throw a ball or run around the yard, or, try to foster this skill building part of it, that how can we deal with our emotions in a way that doesn't hurt other people? That's the biggest piece of it. And that takes a long time to learn. Even adults, I mean, we do this too, right? We yell at people and, but I think if we can try to give them some tools, some people like doing like a calming corner instead of like timeout, which doesn't necessarily teach anything. Calming corner is, this is an area you go that has things to help you calm down in a healthy way so that you don't hit or scream or yell. So, you can get sets, you can do your own. There's posters you can put up that talk about emotions. And if kids learn this at an early age, then they're more likely to be able to practice that when they get upset, and they can talk to themselves about, I'm feeling angry. I can take a deep breath. I can use some sort of tactile, dough or slime or a calm down jar, whatever works for your kid. It can be, a variety of things, but helping them to understand that emotions themselves aren't bad. They're like your body's signal that, you're experiencing something, you're going through something, but we don't have to take it out on other people and hurt other people when our emotions get out of control. So that those things can be helpful. The other thing that the book talks a lot about, and that has been eye-opening to me as well, is not distracting our kids out of their emotions. And this is a hard one again. So your kid gets upset, they're sad, they had a bad day at school. And sometimes our immediate reaction is like, oh, well, let's go out for ice cream. That'll help you feel better. Let's go, distract them out of it instead of helping them work through whatever the bad feeling is. And there's a quote from this book that I wanted to read because I thought it was so good. They said, when we step in and rescue a child from a problem she can handle on her own, we short circuit her opportunity to learn how to address a difficult situation or understand her capacity to handle hard stuff. And so I think that's at the heart of it, is we're robbing our kids of this skill building opportunity if we just distract them out of some bad feeling, or, distract them with a device, distract them with whatever, just try to get that negative emotion. Like, I don't want to deal with them being sad is basically what we're saying. So I'm going to just try to shuffle that away and help them feel better in this kind of artificial way. Now, we've all done this. I mean, I've done this, right? It's sort of your natural reaction, right? Let's go out and have ice cream. Let's go do something fun that you like to do so you don't feel bad. Even we do this as adults, right? When we feel bad, we've had a hard day, we go out and go to happy hour, or we go have a nice dinner to help us feel better. And, it's not like it's a horrible thing to do. It's just that we don't want to do it every time, because then our kids don't have the opportunity to really work through that negative feeling. How do I help myself feel better when I've had a bad day at school? What can I do? And that's where we can step in and just be there with them and listen, and offer advice if it seems like it's the right time. But really, they just have to kind of work through that negative feeling and sometimes cry it out or whatever. I mean, I don't know how many times you've probably experienced this with your kids, where they've had a bad day or something really bad has happened, and they just have to go and cry, and you can hug them and hold their hand, and they just have to get that emotion out, and then everything's better. They feel better and they get through it. And sometimes it's not as easy as just crying. Sometimes it's some bigger problem that has to be worked through with some help. But the whole point is, they have, in many situations, they have the skills to deal with that negative emotion, or we can help them deal with the negative emotion, but we don't have to just shuffle it off and distract them with some sort of, device or food or whatever it might be. This is very hard with toddlers. I will admit this. This is probably one of the harder times to not distract. I mean, I did this when my kids were toddlers because I don't think I knew any better at the time. If they were crying over something, didn't want to get in the car seat and they're throwing a fit about getting in the car seat, you hand them a book or a toy, and that's a small situation, right? But over time, as they experience more feelings of disappointment or frustration, or, always handing them a device or a distraction is, not going to work in the long term. And so at some point, as they kind of mature, because toddlers do have very little, emotional maturity to handle that stuff. But as they mature, try to teach them different ways, taking deep breaths, or if you feel frustrated, don't hit your brother, you can hit a pillow, or go run around the block, or go run up the stairs and try to get some of that energy out, things like that. It takes time with younger ones because they don't have that emotional regulation in place, but that's the way they're going to learn those things, is by practicing it. And so not distracting all the time and not, just pushing those negative emotions away is a key point of this, kind of approach to parenting. And it is sort of against the grain, because a lot of times you see this everywhere. You see, just do something and make your kid happy again. And so to me, the whole point is, it's not always about making them happy. It's about helping them learn skills. And that, I think, is a real eye-opener if you think about the long term of what you want your child to learn. I think it can be really crucial in helping them learn emotional skills. And then all the little daily things that we do with our kids can also help foster emotional skills. It can be as simple as you're watching a TV show and there's some interaction between the characters that is not so nice, let's say. You can talk to your kids about that and just say, like, oh, why, that really hurt that person's feelings. Why did he do that? Or what could we have done differently? And same thing with books. There's lots of examples of great books that teach kindness and show these types of skills. But the thing is, sometimes you have to really point out the interaction that happens in a TV show or a book, and talk about, like, what if it's a negative interaction, like talk about the opposite and talk about what this person could have done differently. Because very young kids especially, they will often focus on the negative interaction and sometimes copy that. Even though, I was just reading a study about this, even though like sometimes cartoons, even for toddlers and young kids, will show some, little fight between the characters. And then in the end, it's resolved, right? The kids make up, everything turns out fine. Well, very little kids, 2, 3, 4 years old, sometimes they just pick up on the fighting part and they don't put together the part about how the friends made up and how they got back together. And so you may have to really explain that to them. Otherwise, they might just copy the fighting part. It happens. I've seen it happen. So again, that's the part about being intentional about, what can we teach from an emotional perspective about this situation. And then, of course, our words and our language matters a lot, especially with young kids. Um, there's a study that talks about, and I have a post on this, I'll have to go dig it up, but um, the more parents use language with kids that talk about emotions and help explain people's emotions, the more kids learn empathy and taking another person's perspective. So we hear this all the time, our words matter, words have power. It is really true, and the research shows this. The way we talk to our kids matters. Of course, the way we talk to them individually, like using kind words with them, of course, that is also important. But the way that we talk about the emotions of other people too. So, if we're out at a store, we hear a baby crying or you see a toddler throwing a fit, try to explain to your, because a lot of times kids get upset themselves, right? They're inherently sort of empathetic to a certain extent, very young kids even. Why is that kid crying? Why is that baby upset? And we can talk them through that and like explain, oh, they're feeling sad because their mom wouldn't, buy them a toy or whatever. That's usually the case. Or they're feeling sad because they fell down. Whatever it is, explaining that stuff to kids really helps. And also trying to help them understand what another person might be feeling. Now, at very young ages, they don't really have the mental capacity to put themselves in another person's point of view. That mental kind of transition hasn't happened before about maybe 4 years old. But you can still talk to them about how another person's feeling. It'll eventually kind of take hold and they'll understand it. And so talking about emotions, I'm sad because, this thing happened that, at work that made me sad, or, you don't want to impose your problems and adult problems on young children, but you can talk about how other people are feeling. And I think that really does help them eventually gain that emotional insight into how other people are feeling. And that's really crucial. So there, little boost, little promo for my own stuff. I have this little daily activity sheet. If you would like a copy of that, I can put the either the post that it's attached to, or if you just leave your email here in the comments, I can send that to you. That goes over several of the things that I talked about and just a little handout to kind of jog your memory about these things. But this stuff's important, and I hope that, in this group, we can help foster that kind of atmosphere of supporting each other in fostering emotional intelligence in ways that maybe our culture doesn't always support and doesn't always, you don't always see out in our popular culture. And so that's what this group is all about. So I hope that was helpful. If you have questions later as you're watching, please put those in. And thanks for watching, and have a good Friday.